everyone, this is Manohar Reddy, Assistant Professor, Department of Cybersecurity, Institute of Aeronautical Engineering. Today I am going to discuss about the next concept is database languages. Database languages. In the previous sessions, we already discussed about the different data models, different ER model types, ER model attributes, entities, relationships, and all the different types of databases, how to install the database softwares and everything. So in this session, we are going to discuss about the different types of languages, or commands that you are going to use in the database software. We'll see. So database languages actually. So what is meant by database language? So definitely in every programming language, all the languages are going to be compiled and linking with the help of all the commands or syntaxes. In the same way, database software also included in the syntaxes and semantics from the commands. So with the help of these DDL languages or DML languages, all the database languages are going to be compiling and linking with the help of database softwares, and it gives the result to the user based on the commands that you are queried, or requested. So we'll see. Actually, what is meant by language? So it communicates to the compiler, or it communicates to the software to display something. So see here, a database has appropriate languages and interfaces to express database queries and updates. So it is an appropriate languages and interfaces to express the database queries and updates. So we have to write some queries, and that queries has to be processed by the query processor, and based on this all the evaluation, we are going to retrieve the result. From the database software, right? So for this purpose, we have mentioned this one. Database language can be used to read, store, and update the data in the database. We can read the data, we can store the data, and we can update the data in the database. So in the database software, we have to design the database, right? As well as we have to read the values from the database, we have to store the data into the database, and we have to update the data in the database, right? So this is all what we have to do by using these DBMS languages. So database management system provides some languages to communicate with the database from the user. So user has to communicate with the software, the database software, by using some database languages. So those are all nothing but DDL, data definition language, DML, data manipulation language, TCL, transaction control language, and DCL, data control language. So DDL is nothing but data definition language, DML is nothing but data manipulation language, and TCL is nothing but transaction control language, and DCL is nothing but data control language. So all the syntaxes and the commands will use it to interact with the database from the user. Users are going to be interactive with the database with the help of these all some commands. These are all some syntaxes, right? So we'll see. The first one is what? Data definition language. So DDL stands for what? Data definition language, and use it to define the database structure. Or pattern. So with this language, we are going to define the structure or pattern of the database, and it is used to create a schema. A schema is nothing but a blueprint or a place, you can say that, under tables, instances, indexes, constraints in the database. So we can create all these by using this language. If you want to create the table, you can understand this language. If you want to create the constraints, you can understand this language. So with the help of this, you are going to do this all the creation of tables, creation of indexes, creation of constraints, and everything, right? So using the DDL statements, you can create the skeleton of the database. And this is used to store the information of metadata Metadata is nothing but data about the data, data within the data. So we can create multiple types of data, that is nothing but metadata, like number of tables and schemas and their names and indexes, columns in each table, constraints and everything. So these are all we are going to create with the help of we are going to create with the help of DDL language. So data definition language. So see here. So what are the syntaxes? What are the commands we are going to learn from the DDL syntax, DDL language? So see here. Here some of the tasks under DDL. So first one is very important command is create. So create is very important DDL command. It is used to define your data, define your table, define your database also. So to creating the database, to creating the table, we are going to use the create option, create command. So create, so you can write the syntax like create database, database name. Then you can create the database. Similarly, if you want to create the table also, create a table name along with the entities that you have to create. So like the way you can create the database and the tables with the help of this create command. And similarly, alter, it is used to alter the structure of the database. So alter is nothing but modify, or restructured. So it is used to alter the structure of the database. It is used to alter the structure of the database. So if you want to add some sizes to the database, you can use this command. Alter command is used to resize the database, resize the table, resize the columns and everything. So you can resize or you can modify them with the help of this alter command. And next, drop command. So it is used to delete or drop objects from the database. It is used to delete or drop from the object database. So if you want to delete the records, you can use the delete. You can, if you want to drop the database, entirely drop, you can use the command like drop database name, drop database name. Then the database is completely dropped, right? So the same way, truncate. So truncate is also used to remove the records from the table. Remove the records from the table. So the table contains records and records contains values, right? So all the records are going to remove by using this truncate command. Next one is what? Rename. So renaming the object. So if you want to rename the table or rename the column name, you can use this rename command. So by using this rename command, you can rename the table. So like rename table, old table name to new table name. Then you can create a rename of the table, new name of the table. So that is nothing but rename. And a comment. So it is used to comment on the data dictionary. So if you want to mention some comments on the database, so you can write the comment is as a command. And that is about data definition language. And second one is data manipulation language. So DDL stands for data definition, means it defines the structure or pattern of the data, but it is not going to be inserting, it is not going to be deleting all, but it is going to be mention the structure or pattern of the database. But if you want to manipulate the data inside of the tables, you can use the DML commands. So see here, DML stands for what? Data manipulation language, and it is used for accessing and manipulating of the database. It is used to accessing and manipulating of the databases. So it handles user requests also. So here are some tasks that comes under DML. So what are those? First one is select command. If you want to display the particular records, particular values, then you can use the select command. So select is used to retrieve the data from database. And insert, if you want to insert values in the table, If you want to store the data into the table, then you can use this insert command, insert data into the table. Next, update. So it is used to update existing data in the table. So existing data in the table can have the values, but if you want to modify, if you want to update the table values, you can use this update command. You can use this update command. And similarly, delete. So it is used to delete all records, delete all the records from the table, all the records from the table. So if you want to delete on particular record, then you can able to delete. If you want to delete all the records, you can able to delete all the records. So for this purpose, you are going to use the delete command. And next, merge. So it performs upset operations. That means simultaneously you can perform update operation as well as insert operation. So update operation and update operation plus insert operation is nothing but offset, operation. So merge command is used to do this operation. And the call, it is used to call a structured query language or Java subprograms. If you want to integrate any Java program, if you want to integrate any query program, so you can mention that call that program name, then you can able to calling them. And explain plan, so it has the parameter of explaining the data. So explain plan is a syntax to explaining the particular parameter of the data. And log table, so log table, it controls concurrency of the data. It controls concurrency of the data. So concurrency of the data is nothing but simultaneously accessing the data, simultaneously accessing or simultaneously processing the data. So it controls that simultaneous parallel processing data, simultaneous processing data, right? So this is all about DDL commands and DML commands. And next, transaction control language. So especially transaction control language commands are used to do the transactions also, used to do the transactions. In the real-time examples, we are having ATM machines, right? We are having ATM machines, and from there we are going to withdraw some money or we are depositing some money. So there, these all the language commands, commit, save point, rollback, set transactions, these are all very, very important to performing on the transactions. So generally a transaction is nothing but a single or logical unit of an operation. A single or logical unit of an operation. So the transaction control statements are used to run the changes made by DML statements. Run the changes made by DML statements. So DML statements are used to manipulate the data. So whatever the manipulation is done, that has to be committed and that has to be saved permanently. That has to be committed, that has to be saved permanently. So to doing all the statements, to allowing those statements, we are going to perform this transaction control language. To do this all the things, we are going to perform this all the steps. So commit, so it saves the work done before a minute. So what we are doing the work for last minute is going to be committed, then it saves automatically permanently. It saves automatically and permanently. Next, save point. So save point identifies a point in transaction to which you can later roll back. So whatever the work you are assigned by the worker, whatever the work you are assigned and you are going to do that the particular time, and if you want to do it work as a later, then you can save it as a save point. Then the work will be rolled back by next minute or next day. So that means you are going to perform that work on the next day or next minute. So by doing this save point option. And rollback. So rollback is nothing but it restores the database. It restores the database to original. So whatever the changes we done in the previous minute, we are going to roll back them. So then the previous minute, whatever the data is there, will be retrieved. So that last commit is nothing but last saved. So from the last saved options, the data is going to be rolled back. Next, set transaction. So set transaction. It changes the transaction options. Like isolation level and what rollback segment to use to get the isolation. So we are going to perform some steps for the transaction. You are going to set the transaction for the purpose and begin the transaction and processing the transaction, and then next last ending the transaction. So for this purpose we are going to use this language, set transaction. And next, data control language, DCL, data control language. So DCL stands for what? Data control language. It is used to retrieve the stored or saved data. It is used to retrieve or stored or save the data. So the DCL execution is what? A transactional. The DCL execution is what? Transactional. That means it is committed as well as it is rollback. It is committed as well as rollback. It also has a rollback parameters. It also has some rollback parameters. So we are having some commands in the DCL. So the first one is what? System. So creating a session, creating a tables and all the types of system privileges. So these are all, we are going to apply some privileges to the particular objects like tables, like queries, like views, like sessions, everything. With this command you are going to give the privileges. Next one is object. So object is nothing but any of table, any of the view, any of the procedure, any of the function, any command or query to work on tables comes under object privilege. So DCL uses for this purpose two types of command. So DCL uses for this purpose two types of command. That means giving the privileges to the database or giving the privileges to the users. Giving the privileges to the database or giving the privileges to the users on the database. So for this, grant and revoke, these two commands are used to granting the privileges to the user on the database. So granting is nothing but it gives user access privileges to the database. It gives user access privileges. So user wants to access some data from the database, but user has to get some privileges from the administrator. So that administrator will give the privileges to the user. Then user can do all the aspects on the database, all the transactions on the database. And revoke, so it takes back permissions from the user. So once will granting the permissions, granting the privileges on the database. If we'll do any wrong sentences, then we'll get back the permissions from the original stage. So to granting the permissions as well as to reverting the permissions, we are going to use these granting and revoke commands. Grant and revoke commands, right? So these are all the different database languages that you are going to interacting with the users to the softwares, interacting with the users to the software. So user has to interacting with the software with the help of this all the languages syntaxes. So how to insert the tables, how to insert the values in the table, how to drop the table, how to create the table, how to create the database, how to update the values in the table. These are all we are going to be done using this database languages. So now we understand one thing. What? So database languages are the communicative sentences, communicative syntaxes to interacting users to the database. Communicative syntaxes to the users to the database, right? So the database is ready and language syntaxes is also ready. But users, how many types of users, how many types of database users will have to interacting with the databases? How many users will have to interacting with the databases? We'll see. So the next concept is what? That is database users, different types of database users. So users are nothing but who will use the database, who will access the database, who will modify the database, all the activities performing on the database, whoever it may be. So that is nothing but database user actually. So the interaction of users to the database system is made to store information and provide an environment for retrieving the information. Why should user has to interact with the database? Means the user has to store some information and provide an environment for retrieving the information, to storing the information and providing some environment for retrieving the information. So for these two purposes mainly, user has to interact with the database. So we'll see how many types of database users are going to be interacting with the database. So the first one is what? Database administrator. Database administrator. So he is a person or team who defines the schema, and also controls the levels of abstractions, levels of database. So that is nothing but a database administrator. We can call him as a database administrator. He can have the all privileges to maintaining the database, So DBA will create a new account ID and password for the user if he need to access the database. So if you want to access the database, he must have an user ID and he must have an password also. And it is responsible for providing security to the database. He is responsible for providing security to the database, and he allows only the authorized users to access or modify the database. So database administrator can create the databases, can create the users, can create the privileges to the users also, granting the privileges to the users also. Like the way different activities going to be performed by the database administrator on the users or on the database. So database administrator is responsible for everything that is related to the database. He makes the policies, strategies, and provides some technical supports also, and also monitors the recovery and backup and provide technical supports. Everything is maintaining all the records from the previous, from the past to present or present to future itself. So administrator maintains all the administration activities on the database. So that's why DBA, database administrator, is the main role to managing or activating the database. And the second type, Nave are parametric end users. So these users are unsophisticated users who don't have any DBMS knowledge, but they frequently use the database applications in their daily life to get the result. So these people doesn't have any knowledge on a particular DBMS or particular MySQL, particular Oracle, but they can use the database applications in regular life, right? So for example, railways ticket bookings and the banking sectors, they don't have any knowledge on the database, but they are interacting with the database applications in daily basis, right? So those are all Nave users or parametric end users. And system analyst. So system analyst is a user who analyze the requirements of parametric end users. So those users who doesn't have any database knowledge can use the database applications, right? So for that purpose, the analyst can analyze the requirements that needed to use the database applications. So they check whether all the requirements of end users are satisfied or not. System analyst is responsible for design, structure, and properties of the database. So all the requirements of the end users are handled by system analyst. So all the end users, all the Nave or parametric end users are handled by system analyst. So he will handle all the end users those who doesn't have knowledge on DBMS. Next, sophisticated users. So sophisticated users can be engineers. Scientists, business analysts who are familiar with the database. That means they must have knowledge on the database, how to interact with the database also. And they can develop their own database applications according to their requirements. So they can have the knowledge on database to develop their applications according to their requirements. And they don't write the program code, but they interacting with the database by writing SQL queries directly through query processor. So they don't write any programming code, but they can execute the SQL queries directly through the query processor. So they can have the knowledge on SQL queries, SQL commands and everything, but they don't write any program code to interact with the database, right? So that is a sophisticated users. And the database designers. So database designers are nothing but, we already said that database design is very important role to interacting with the database, right? So database designers are the users who design the structure of a database. which includes tables creations, indexes, views, constraints, triggers, stored procedures, and all. So to creating all these, to designing all this, to creating all this, to designing all this, you must have some knowledge on different models, right? Different models. That models are nothing but data models, ER models, relational models, and semi-structured model, object-oriented models. So you must have knowledge on data models to design this database. So he or she controls what data must be stored and how the data items to be related. How the data items to be related. So this is the designer's point of view. Designer's point of view, and they must design a software which is going to be stored and using the data items in the different purposes. Different purposes. And next one, casual user. So casual users are nothing but these users have great knowledge on query language. These users have a great knowledge of query language, and the casual users access data by entering different queries from the terminal end. Different queries from the terminal end, and they do not write programs, but they can interact with the system by writing queries. They can interacting with the systems by writing queries. So they can write the queries and they can interacting with the database software with the help of terminal. So these are all the users are nothing but casual users. So the users are going to be interacting with the database softwares with the help of database languages. But according to the knowledge on the database, the users have be classified in different ways. So database analyst, database administrator is one role, parametric end users are one role, sophisticated users are one role, database designers are one role, system analysts are one role, casual users are one role. So these are all the different types of users are going to be interacting with the database software. See what we discussed in this session. We'll see once again. So database languages classified into different types: DDL, DML, TCL, DCL. So DDL stands for what? Data definition language. DML stands for what? Data manipulation language. And TCL stands for what? Transaction control language. And DCL stands for what? Data control language. So user has to interacting with the database with the help of by writing these syntaxes and commands in the terminal end or Oracle software or MySQL software anyway. So data definition language here. So data definition language can have the commands like what? So create, alter, drop, truncate, rename, comment. So finally, this all the DDL commands shows the design pattern of the tables or design pattern of the objects. So tables, views, functions, procedures, anything you can say that it is a database object. So how you are going to design them, how you are going to create them is nothing but DDL commands. And similarly, data manipulation language. So data manipulation language contains what? Select, insert, update, delete, merge, call, explain, plan, and log table. So among these all, select, insert, update, delete are very important commands, very important commands to interact with the database. And similarly, transactional control language. So in the regular basis, we are committing, we are noting that commit and the save point, rollback. These four are very important commands in the regular life also. So and the data control language. So the data control language, we are going to apply the permissions. We are going to apply the permissions on the specific user or specific database to granting the privileges to the user, to granting the privileges on the database itself, and to revoking them. For this purpose, the data control language is used. And for all the syntaxes and semantics are going to be used by the users. Users have different types of users and they are going to be interacting with the database. So different types of users are DBA, database administrator, and NAVE are parametric end users, and system analysts, and sophisticated users, and database designers, and casual users. Some of them are having a strong knowledge on database and they can write the queries, they can able to develop the codes also. And some database users have doesn't know knowledge on database, but they can able to use the database applications right in the regular basis. So this is all what from this session. Thank you.
Like, share, and subscribe. Hit the bell icon for more updates.